as we deal with the subject, the man of sin. It's only in 2 Thessalonians that Paul uses that terminology. It really means the lawless one. Through the Scriptures, there are different identities given to this one particular evil character that's to come on the scene here in the end time. Now, as I said this morning, as I read here, this fellow, he's an educated man. And here I go again, picking on the educated. I don't do that to be foolish, but to let you know, if you're going to build your profession in economics, you better have enough of education to know how to handle the figures of what you're dealing with. If you're going to fly an airplane like Brother Morrow here has, then for goodness sakes, you better know how to read the maps, altitudes, pressures, and all of that stuff. But there's one thing that God has reserved to Himself. He can take an educated man, and by the time he wipes out of his brain everything he ever knew, he can put in there what he does supposed to know. That's why Paul said, everything that he had ever attained and reached to, he counted as nothing. But then when we see these other men in the New Testament especially, we don't want to look upon them as though they're highly professional, educated characters. Yet look what they wrote that has stood the test through the ages of time, especially this age of grace. Now here is why a man like I just read from this morning would say that the Holy Roman Empire had a political leader, and he calls him the Antichrist, and a religious leader, he called him the false prophet, the Pope of Rome. Now that would sound good for a lot of people if you did not know history itself. But after 800 A.D., when Charlemagne was crowned as king of the Holy Roman Empire, it's true, there was a short interval of time, over 100 years there, that Pope and, we will say, Prince, they set equal, dividing the sphere of government of the Holy Roman Empire. But by the time we come to Otto the Great, who was the Pope this time, he is the one that elevated the power of the papacy, and that's why we can say this. In the 17th chapter of Revelation, that there's 7 heads, and yet it spoke of an 8th head. The 8th head did not put 8 heads on. These heads in this meaning, the 7 represent the evolutionary political changes that the Holy Roman Empire, under the imperial type of government that it rose to power with, how through the evolution of politics it evolved. Each stage it gets weaker through the centuries. As it got weaker, that's how come the horns got their identity on the geographical territory. Then when we come to the time of Otto the Great, he was called the Pope Maker, meaning what he did, because he was about 100 years after Charlemagne's hour. What he did, it elevated the office of the papacy to start that supreme authority. By the time we come from 9 to 1,000, 11, 12, 13, 14, 1500, I've got the histories. I challenge any man to know how much education he's got. It plainly shows you that the emperors of Rome were merely figureheads, not men of great authority. In fact, the emperor in Rome, his identity just began to just wilt, like a tomato plant that's been frostbit. That's why then, for the last 500 years of the power of the papacy, just before the Reformation broke, there was one supreme power through all Europe, And that was the power of the Papal Church. I don't say that to be derogatory or to put down on a Catholic person. There are many Protestants today just as ignorant about the facts of things as there are Catholic people. And because I say that, when this man uses the time in that relative period there when Charlemagne was crowned the Holy Roman Empire of the Empire, yes, that placed the Pope and the Emperor, the King, on equal basis. But that didn't last long. That's why they can use that. But after that period, then the emperors, the political figures, none of them meant anything to the power of the Pope, because it was in that following period of time then, King Henry of Germany, Barbarossa of Italy, and King Francis of France were all dethroned by an excommunication, calling a strike, and they all had to recant and submit themselves back under the power of the papacy to be restored back to their government positions. That's why it says in the 7th chapter of Daniel, and this little horn shall subdue 3 horns. It's very strange how this little horn could grow so slow, but eventually become so powerful. And brothers and sisters, when it was the last form of government, church government taken over the last form of imperial political government, that becomes your 8th head, yet it's of the 7. It's when political and ecclesiastical blend together. Now that's just as simple as a fly on my nose, the best I can say it. Now that was the head. That was the type of government. Then we come to the 12th, the 13th, and the 14th, and into the 15th century, when the Dark Ages of Europe became so outstanding. Because the church was in power, the church was the voice. We can say this. You study the history, there was no advancement, no high learning, because the Catholic Church taught that learning was evil. Well, I never have thought that learning in one sense of the word is evil, because that's how knowledge and things become known to people. What's evil is how sinful men with political aims and objectives uses education to twist it to their own means of authority and rule. That's when it's evil. With that in mind, that's why there was a Reformation. It starts in 15 and 20. However, there were the forerunners before that, Zwingli and Huss and those. They all got martyred by the Catholic Church. But when we come to Martin Luther in 15 and 20, the time had come now that God was going to strike this head with the sword of the gospel. It was not just one strike. Over a period of years, it was strike after strike. God used men right out of the Catholic environment of Europe. They rose up in different areas of Europe. And God put a revelation of truth in their hearts. And each one took his hack at the power of the Vatican. All you have to do is go back into the histories of that. Read what happened. That's why when you get into Revelation 13, which is a picture of the Roman Empire being restored in our hour, it carries the same identity that the Roman Empire had back there in 14 and 1500, just before the Reformation struck it and began to wound it. What you read in Revelation 13 is not a picture of a beast. That's something new rising up. It's the rising up of something old that's already been. It's done had its day. And God just gives it an opportunity to be restored for a short period of time. That's why it says, the beast that was and is not, that's the period that covers the Reformation, and yet it is. So with that in mind, I want to take you back here tonight to Daniel the 11th chapter. There's something about this evil king here I think I want to explain. Now it says here, starting in the 37th verse, neither shall he regard the God of his fathers. Well, see, to a lot of people down through the years, when you talk about the Pope being the Antichrist or the false prophet, they automatically jump on that. Well, how come this? It says, neither shall he regard the God of his fathers. Well, yes. When we look at the power of the Pope and his position in the world of religion and politics, we see him as a religious figure. He is the vicar of Christ. He is supposedly to be God's representative on earth. This is why Billy Graham would put out that statement. He is the most righteous man on the face of this earth. That's only a title that fallen-natured man has given to him. It fits their ego. It fits their ignorance. It fits their sleepy attitude. That's not a divine revelation out of the Word of God at all. Now, but let us say this. If for some reason the man that is to be the man of sin, the Antichrist, the false prophet, the son of perdition, all these titles and identities that's attributed to him, for him to be able to fulfill what's said right here, as I said this morning, you let this Pope even, let him sit across in the Vatican, and I'm sure if something was to begin to unfold in the Middle East, and brothers, let me say this. Right here is a picture of Netanyahu. He is speaking to the Pope. He is at the Vatican when he spoke to the Pope. He's begging the Pope to come and help out in this, we will say, selling the squabble in the Middle East about Jerusalem. All of this goes to show, brothers and sisters, this man of sin is not just some politicians out of the wild. Because it is a fact, brothers and sisters, the Vatican have had their eye on Jerusalem for a long, long time. Why does this Jew go and beg him to come quickly? We can say this tonight. All the heads, we will say, of certain governments that are to be instrumental in this final era of false peace, as he comes out of Israel, as he comes out of the Vatican, and out of other areas of politics throughout the world, old world, especially Europe and the Middle East. By the time that 70th week of Daniel is arrived, there will be every man on the scene that's supposed to be there. This is a day and an hour when God can put down and he can lift up any politician he wants to see that his word is fulfilled. I will say this tonight. If time was to continue on, unhindered, as it is now fast in the making, yes, the leadership of our president, with a lot of other cohorts of political places in the world, yes, their aim is a new world order. There's a lot of things about this new world order a lot of American people don't even know a thing about. They're going to sit back and just fold their hands and say, well, I'm in America. Yes, and brothers and sisters, if God allowed it, a lot of the things you've enjoyed by being American will be swept away from you over a night's time. Because these politicians care less about you. Why do I say that? When I heard yesterday morning the news about down here near Campbellsburg and Shelbyville, this textile garment factory shutting down. One woman testified how she had worked there for 18 long years. What is that going to do to that community? I forget, I think it was close to about 14, 15, 1,600 people that worked there. Don't tell me that that's not going to create an economic crunch in them areas. What's going to come in and rehire those people and pay them a salary, a livelihood, like that place has. But the New World Order vision is this. This is the way that in the New World Order, the world distributes its wealth potential. Its ability to, we will say, help scatter it throughout the world. So to do that, nations that cooperate, especially America, the United States and Canada and places like that, they sacrifice the well-being economically of their own people in order to make that a fact in other nations. And I will have to say, it was that dirty Catholic religion that came across the Atlantic and settled into Latin America and has ruled those people for hundreds and hundreds of years, that kept them in ignorance and poverty, because the Catholic Church taught also that wealth was sin. See, they will use any means to have their way, so they can always set atop the world political system. Latin America and South America has, in a potential sense, just as good agricultural potential as the United States has. Venezuela has oil. Mexico has oil. It's very strange that it's just here in the last few years that some of these natural resources begin to be discovered and set in motion to help the economies of those nations. Those nations could absolutely be just as much competitive to the United States today as any nation in Europe or any nation in the Orient. I've been in the Orient in World War II. Some of them places in the Orient, brothers and sisters, were just as in bad a position, economic and material-wise, as anything in South America or Latin America. But we see what has happened in the Orient since World War II. What woke them up? It sure wasn't the Catholic Church. It was the United States ready in their brothers and sisters, governed them, sent leaders in there, technicians of every description. I've said this. Before World War II, Chrysler had an assembly plant there. Ford Motor had an assembly plant in Tokyo. General Motors had an assembly plant in Tokyo. The Japanese did not have any factories that molded parts. All the parts for vehicles was absolutely precast here in the States, rolled out and such, shipped there for assembling. When the war broke out, there was no more parts went to the Orients, to Japan. What Japan had then was how she took over then these assembly plants. And anybody that served in World War II in those areas, the Japanese never had no four-wheel, six-wheel drive army vehicles. It was unknown. What they did, they took the parts of trucks and things that was already there, and they modified this, they modified that, and they put together vehicles, just conventional two-wheel drive army trucks. I've seen the frames of Dodge with a Ford motor in it and a Chevrolet cab, as the Japanese modified it. And that's why we always hit them in the monsoon season. You know when we went in the Philippines, brother? Right in the rainy season. In a few days' time, brothers and sisters, every road is nothing but a quagmire. And them Japanese trucks sitting there in their mud on the end of the supply lines. And our airplanes just strafing the daylights out of them. Go along them same roads later, months later, when the war is over, there they are, burnt out. The old hull remains. I'm just saying that, brothers and sisters. And some of their old motorcycles sound like old Maytag washing machines. But then after we went in there after the war, and our aim was to rebuild Japan back out of this war state of devastation, yes, again we started the assembly lines. Yet we took every means of modern inventions over there, from tape recorders to the building of RCA radios. TVs and everything. This time, brothers and sisters, their idea was, well, you licked us on the battlefield, but we will lick you and we will conquer you on the field of technology. It wasn't long, brothers and sisters, as their men worked in our assembly plants over their putting automobiles and things together. In their mind, they calculate, they formulate, they put together a picture of some type of a vehicle of their own design. And figuratively speaking, they go 2 blocks down in town and they set up a shop of their own. And it isn't long, brothers and sisters, here comes the Datsun, the Honda. You name it, here it came. It wasn't long. Here come their brand of motorcycles. And today they lead the world in the production of motorcycles. I did not say in the production of the best. The Japs still like the Harley Davidson. That's American original. And they'll never be able to come up with that. But I'm saying this, brothers and sisters, wherever that Catholic Church as a spirit has ruled its people, it's held them in ignorance. It kept them in poverty. And that's why for the last 50 years, brothers and sisters, in Latin America and South America, you've had nothing but guerrilla warfare, internal uprisings. Communism feeds on the poverty of where Catholicism has ruled. That's why it found a bed and an incubator in Russia back at the turn of the century. Now with that in mind, now then we've got a pope, and this is him. He's saying to the rich, but share your wealth with the world of rich. Say to the rich, share your wealth with the poor of the world. Yes, he's one man that can say that, but the popes before him did not set that in a practical sense of the word. Step into these cities in Latin America, they wanted no missionaries to come in and to convert their people. And I have to say, brothers and sisters, it's a pitiful shame. I read the testimony of one missionary's family that went into Colombia, South America. Yes, there's a few that can go into Colombia, South America now. But this all took place in the late 40s. In this one mountain village, as they had went in there to missionaryize these people. Many of these Catholic families, they became converted to this Protestant missionary. The Catholic Church, the priests rose up against this. What did they do? They notified all the banditos in the mountains that they wanted to use them. And on a certain night, they came through this village, riding on horseback, rounding people up, especially these families that has converted to this Protestant belief. They took them out of their houses, they shot them. Some of them, they put ropes around them and drug them down the streets behind horses. The sad story winds up by the male missionary, the husband of the one. They caught him, and they took him in the daylight hours the next morning into the middle of the town square with his hands tied behind him. And they forced him to kneel there in the town square. This is in Colombia, South America, in one of the main cities there. And as they circled him on horseback with machetes, the riders took their opportunity to hack at his head and killed him. That was in the late 40s, just at the close of World War II. I say this, brothers and sisters, the Catholic Church has not always been looked upon in other nations as that peace-loving, religious sanctuary of sinful men that need salvation. They still need salvation. And they need the truth. But the power of that church and its political hold on the leaders of these nations has held them in poverty. And it's not the power of the Catholic Church in the United States that's made the United States a rich empire. It was the Protestant people that made America great in its hour of greatness. I realize we've got millions of Catholics here now that's been born and raised here, so I don't say these things to be derogatory, disrespectful. Because in the light of time now, I've got neighbors that are Catholics that's just as good of friends to me as Protestant people. But when you leave that and lay that aside, they're all blind and ignorant of what's going on in this world. Now this man here, but in his estate, means in his office, in his position of authority, shall he honor the God of forces, which is military, economics, science, material progress. That's what it means. And a God whom his fathers knew not. That's absolutely the fact. Because in that hour of time, when the Pope of that hour looks across the Mediterranean and seeing in the evening news what for 3.5 years the power of God as it's displayed in the Holy Land by these two prophets, and they have the power to shut the heavens and don't rain. You know what that's going to do to the agricultural potential of Israel? It's going to put it on the rocks. Right now, Israel exports to Europe citrus, tomatoes, peppers, all of those type of commodities, because she raises more than she can consume in her own area. But when these two prophets strike that agricultural, that there's no rain, don't tell me that it's not going to affect the economic agricultural potential. All right, you read in the 11th chapter what them two prophets are going to do. That's in the first part of the week. When that Pope sitting over there sees that, don't tell me, brothers and sisters, that this is not going to strip him of his belief. It is. Because that power is far greater than Hail Mary. You know it. Yes, God lets the Catholics get by with a lot of this stuff. Even right in here is prophecies that the Catholic Church believe. All because of what Mary said to certain individuals at Fatima back many years ago during the World War I period, and also at Garbandera, Spain, to some other individuals. And that's why a lot of the Catholics believe that their last pope is going to be a rascal, because Mary said it would be. All right. And there are a lot of Protestants put more confidence in that than to do the prophecies that's written in this book. Well, let me say this, brothers and sisters. Some of these, God will let them absolutely fall right in place up to a certain point. When the Protestants, backslidden, and all of them get to looking at this, putting more confidence in that, then God sets a bind on it in order for this to override that. And that's what we're going to see. So when this Pope sees this, don't tell me it's not going to do something for his ego. Because it's going to make him realize, I have not got God's power on my side. I do not have Hail Mary as a means of authority to cast a spell on them two characters. It's going to cause him to begin to realize, what is my potential then? What can I do? Because that's going to run the whole picture for him. Yes, he was able to get these nations all to sign a covenant pact with him for 1 week. But now something sets in. And as the two prophets step on the scene and begin to prophesy in the streets of Jerusalem and warn the Jewish people what their leaders have done, what's ahead, what's in the making, the Pope's not going to like it. In fact, it's going to cheat him out of a lot of, we will say, recognition. It's going to absolutely strip his mind of his confidence in his God and in his Hail Marys. No wonder that he will begin to look at the potential from the political side. But I've got the best army there is in the world. Now don't tell me, brothers and sisters, with the European army equipped then with the modern weapons of warfare. Look, 6-7 years ago, we had certain elements of France, Britain, that did join us in the coalition in what we call the Gulf War. The French Legion, there was one of the forces that took off at the same time ours did. They skirted the big circle in the desert, and the aim was to beat the Iraqis from being able to get out of Kuwait without being slaughtered. I'm saying that, brothers and sisters, to try to let you know there was absolutely modern weaponry there. You and I never got a chance to really see how it worked. But when I read in that newspaper that showed the picture of that one lone helicopter hovering there in the air above the entrance to that concrete bunker with 430 some Iraqi soldiers in it, and they have dropped some kind of a leaflet package: surrender or we blow you to pieces. There, that one lone helicopter, like a bumblebee, with death written on its rocket. And you saw it on the screen yourself. They could put them right through the front door. That wasn't so in World War II. It would have been an accident to put a shell through the front door, let alone drop a bomb right down the smokestack, down the elevator shaft. Now, if it was that accurate then, brothers and sisters, you put another 6 or 7 years onto this, and tell me what they're going to have. That Pope is going to have at his power. A military potential, none like it in the world. Why does it read like this in Revelation 13? It took the land beast, which is America, to help restore Europe after the tragedies and the havoc of World War II. Marshall aid went to the rescue of the citizens. We pumped up their economies. Ships began to be loaded with supplies, materials, to start the wheels of process and progress back a-turning. While the Russians tried to cut it off, there was a conflict of superiority. We had the planes to put it there. And brothers and sisters, we showed the world we could rebuild Europe out of a state of havoc. From Sicily to Denmark, from the coast of France to Austria, cities lay in ruins, highways demolished, bridges gone. All of Europe needed to be rebuilt. And that land beast you read about is none other than America. And military-wise, we had the power to call fire down out of heaven. And this guy says here that the Pope's going to call fire down out of heaven. It won't be any different than what we did at Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Remember that. A lot of people think that this is some kind of supernatural satanic powers. No. It's scientific miracles. And that's what's got the world deluded and drunk today. Scientific, well, they're drunk and stupefied on scientific progress. So with the potential we had then in the Gulf War, you put another 6 or 7 years on in front of this now, And tell me, what will that Pope have at his disposal when he takes a united European peacekeeping force and loads them on their amphibious landing craft and heads across that Mediterranean? That man's going to be bad. Now don't tell me he won't. He will be. He's the guy that cooked up this agreement. He's the mastermind of it. But something makes him break it in the middle of the week. Who with? Not necessarily all nature, but with Israel. Because the whole thing spins and turns around what he's done with Israel. And you know yourself, when the middle of that week comes, he enters Jerusalem with such hatred. Now we can see Antiochus Epiphanes characterized in the latter part of the Grecian era, coming out of Syria. The same hatred, the same attitude, to get even, to get rid of, to annihilate, do away with them. That's exactly the attitude he enters Rome. I'll show the world who's boss around here. Yes, everything went well for 3.5 years with these two prophets. The world don't realize this is where God just allows it to happen. But this dirty man, Pope, that has the brain, the mastermind behind this, as he enters with the best military potential there is accessible in the world. Can't you see how them two prophets are shot innocently, defenseless? They couldn't lift their hands to defend themselves for nothing, just like Jesus. And as the Pope looks on, now he's in Jerusalem. As the world begins to see these bodies, leave them lay there. I want the world to look at it and know who's boss from now on. You can just almost hear his self-righteous. It's no longer a Hail Mary man now. He's got a demon that's causing him to use every means of his success to the god of materialism. He's got it on his side. And the world in their belief is on his side. Every atheist is with him. They're egging him on. And the first day, still laying there. The second day, they're still laying there. And the third day, they're still laying there. Their bodies are starting to bloat now. This guy wants the world to look at this. It starts on the fourth day. About the time the world is really beginning to celebrate and send their gifts, as it says. And rejoice over the fact, hey, we got rid of those two characters. Then a voice from heaven says, you know, when God says that's enough, that's enough. Come up hither. I wonder if Diane Sawyer will be sticking around to take. You know, they've always got to stick their nose in wherever there's some kind of activity going on. Whether it's Dan Rather, Tom Brokaw. It ain't like the old World War II forecasters and news commentators. We had Lowell Thomas and those type of men. These are the kind they like to get their nose stuck in all kinds of business activities. But I can just see something begin to happen. God will let this ignorant bunch of atheistic, unbelieving mass of humanity rejoice for 3 days and a half. And then all chaos sets in. Suddenly there's a voice spoke from heaven, come up hither! And I can just see the news media. They've got a camera stuck somewhere just to watch this. God's still going to have the last word when this thing's all over, brothers and sisters. God's kept his nose out of man's affairs for several years now, except certain things. But when he gets to the time that God wants to show himself, he can sure do it. And immediately as their two bodies got right up off of the streets and began to ascend up into heaven, there was an earthquake. Shook that old city of Jerusalem. and 1/10 of the city fell. Now I'm saying this. I said Old Jerusalem. I didn't mean to say the old city. Keep in mind, Jerusalem as a whole thing now covers the whole summit of Mount Zion. It extends, brothers and sisters, to the perimeters of almost Bethlehem. Back in 1968, when I was there the first time, I asked, what is the distance between the outskirts of Jerusalem as it was then to the outskirts of Bethlehem? I said 9 miles. Then back in 79, when we was there the last time, on the bus from Jerusalem to Bethlehem, it looked like now subdivisions coming from both directions almost connect the two cities. So you've got to understand, brothers and sisters, that when Jerusalem is shook by an earthquake, it's God's way of giving witness to what He has just done. 1/10 of the city fell. And in that, there were 7,000 people, their lives snuffed out just like that. God's still going to be boss. He's still going to have people looking to Him. I'm saying that, brothers and sisters, but this man of sin, yes, he shall honor with gold and silver, and with precious stones and pleasant things. All of this is his accessible ability to wealth. Thus shall he do in the most stronghold, meaning in political high places. You know good and well, brothers and sisters, he's not talking about concrete bunkers being the strongholds where he will connive some of this. It's political high places. With a strange God whom he shall acknowledge, the God of force, the God of materialism. Acknowledge and increase with glory. In other words, for 3.5 years, God is going to take His hands off of the whole thing. Go ahead, Satan. He's your man. And the world are your subjects. Yes. And he shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land for gain. And you go on down, and he will also set himself up in the temple. Because the temple, by that time, is going to already be rebuilt. Now here's the sad part. The man that puts this magazine together, somehow or other, gives the impression, he doesn't say it with words, but he gives the impression that somehow or other, it's going to be through the good-naturedness of this man to say the right word, and Israel is going to be able to go and rebuild their temple. You know, brothers and sisters, that isn't the picture at all. I have to say, but nevertheless, that's the way God has allowed them to see the picture. I'm thankful tonight to know there is a true picture in the Bible, just has to be. Come out in the Jerusalem Post yesterday. The Jewish military is being put on the alert. They've got information that Syria is preparing for a war. All the talk that you hear here of late about this terrorism, talk for peace on one hand, and yet they're rattling the swords and the military weapons with the other hand. It all goes to show, brothers and sisters, this world is just short of a war in the Middle East. It's on that chart over there. Not even America realized what's in the making. And I'll have to say, brothers and sisters, it'll make the Gulf War look like kids' play. It will. Now with that, I think I've said enough here to show you why this evil man all of a sudden no longer worships the God of his fathers. How many can see? Because the order of the day then, society is going atheistic. Sure, in the dark tribulation, The 144,000 preach the everlasting gospel. Do you think that's going to bring mass conversion to the saving grace of God? Not at all. But it is God's way of warning a small element of mortal flesh out of all nations. Get back away from this thing. It's God's way of preserving a remnant. I said a remnant of mortality. Physical human beings, to keep them from being destroyed at the coming of Jesus Christ. The rest of mankind, yes, going to be swept under a big blanket of a spirit of atheism. That's why the 19th chapter pictures the beast. That's Europe. The reviving of the Roman Empire. With the other kings of the earth, prepared at some strategic spot to make war against him. And that's why, brothers and sisters, the Bible says that out of his mouth there's a sharp two-edged sword. It's the word of God for judgment. And you talk about screaming. Brothers and sisters, that sword out of the mouth of Jesus is not a literal sword, but it's the word that executes judgment. Every element of nature is going to be at his fingertips. Down in the bowels of this planet, God's got demons down there now, feeding the flames with natural gas. We draw crude oil and stuff this side. Well, where do you think some of the other stuff goes? Do you ever think about it? And I'll tell you, the day that Christ comes, there will be absolutely upheavals in this planet. Down here in the Caribbean, on an island, here in the last few days since June, there's a volcano that had been asleep for 2 years. All of a sudden that thing began to belch, and now then they have vacated off of that island thousands of the inhabitants. There's still a few holding on. But they showed yesterday evening late, it made an explosion and an eruption, and for 5,000 feet it belched it through rock and lava and stuff into the sky. Yes, all of that's very devastating, catastrophic in nature. But wait till that's going on the globe over. At the same time, earthquakes shaking the planet. At the same time, tidal waves sweeping from across the Pacific, going from continent to continent, coming inland for miles. Only when they go back out, sweeps everything with it. Yes, and for hours upon hours upon hours, as Jesus and his bride descend to this earth. Keep in mind, brothers and sisters, the descent of Christ coming to earth is not an instantaneous thing. It goes on long enough, brothers and sisters, that every reprobate, every evil thinker, every politician, every sinful man, no matter what part of the globe he lives on, is going to be compelled to look up and see him. And they will have to go to their knees and bend their hard heads and say, "Thou art God. Hide me from the face of him that sits on the throne." It's coming. Crooked politicians, power-crazed, sell their constituents down the drain for more power and a few more dollars. Don't you think God hasn't got the last thing to do? He has. Now then, I want to go touch one more setting here. So go with me tonight. Let's go to St. John. This particular scripture here, it's a minor setting, but it is beautifully illustrated in the Word that this character is identified in. In the 12th verse, Jesus is praying. And he's praying to the great eternal Spirit. While I was with them in the world, I kept them. He's praying in behalf of the disciples. In thy name, those that thou gavest me, I have kept, and none of them is lost, but the son of perdition, that the scriptures might be fulfilled. This is Judas. How we see Judas in the final stages of his walk with the Lord. We will say a very insignificant one of the disciples. But it goes to show something all the time that he has walked with his with his Lord for better than 3 years. Something's been building up. And as we get closer to the hour that he has to show his real self. And that's why I say, brothers and sisters, you just wait till the actual Pope is on the scene. That's to fulfill the Scriptures. And it'll make your head shake. The idea is that suddenly that man will get and have. Because it's the devil's hour. We see here then, Judas all of a sudden turns on his master. From being a loyal, faithful disciple that went and did the things that his master has instructed the disciples to do. Jesus has already told him, what thou dost, go do quickly. So in his absence, here's a prayer. None of them is lost but the son of perdition, which means this. He was designed by Satan. He was the devil's instrument to lead the Lord to a betrayal and to his crucifixion. It means to lead something to destruction, to destroy. The word perdition means destruction, to destroy it. Now and he sets a type of what the Antichrist, the false prophet, the man of sin is in character identity. This is why, brothers and sisters, the final pope, the final man in this last closing hour of time, he'll be the Antichrist. He'll be the world's false prophet. Why? A prophet in the Scripture means a seer, one that people have looked to for the Word of God to come through. But the prophet, the Pope, he is a false prophet. The Word of God does not come to him. He's taken that which is the true Word of God and perverted it. Turned it upside down. Turned it into rituals and ceremonies. And he's used this then as a means to sell the Word of God to a element of world society for a monetary gain. Now then, so as we look at Judas, what do we see? Do we see the real man of sin? No, you don't. But you see a type of the real man of sin. Because this man, he was the cause of leading Jesus to betrayal. Finally, it takes him to the high court of Israel. There he's condemned to death. Then after Judas comes, he senses, what have I done? Now the spirit that made him go do that takes him out and he commits suicide. Can't you see, son of perdition? One ordained to lead something to destruction, so the same spirit that did destroy, they thought was to destroy the Messiah, destroyed the one that fulfilled that. But now you take that and put that spirit on the Antichrist, the man of sin, you have the real son of perdition. Because he is going to lead the world religiously, spiritually, into a mass suicide. That's what it all comes to. That's why, brothers and sisters, it says in the 17th chapter of Revelation, describing that eighth head, where does that eighth head come from? It comes out of the bottomless pit. Well, in that sense of the word, brothers and sisters, it's not talking about the mere man. It's talking about the spirit of the devil that uses the man on earth in his office to characterize and fulfill and do all the satanic things. And notice it says in Revelation 17, the 8th, he shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and the end result is he shall go into perdition. Meaning, he will be cast into the lake of fire for the destruction. Then when you read the final analysis of it all, brothers and sisters, he's the one that leads the nations of the world, has them all unified with all their military potential to fight Jesus. And that's where Jesus, brothers and sisters, let me say this. His descent to earth is not, as I said before, it's not an instantaneous thing in that sense of the word. That great scene of him descending slowly to earth, it's going to last long enough. Hell, this planet is going to belch, vomit. Volcanoes will appear before there's never been volcanoes. Earthquakes will rip continents in two. Rivers will appear. Rivers will sink. Mountains will disappear. Islands will hide. What is it? It's the day of the Lord's wrath. And who shall be able to stand it? What a shaking. Now then, I think with this, I'll just stop right here. I tried my best to show you what this one particular man, in all the potential abilities, he fulfills. Spirit-wise, it's the mystery of iniquity. Spirit-wise, it's the spirit of Antichrist. But the man himself carries many identities. And he's one and the self-same thing. I don't care what these fellows will say. God's true people are not going to be misled. They're going to know the truth. That's why it's written in here. And when you hear these fellows today, well, now, Mr. Jackson, you see, it's like this. Are you sure that you're right? I'll just say this. Stick around. Stick around. There's something in the making. And it's not Grandma's donuts either. God's getting ready to shake something. And you know, I'll be so glad. When God starts shaking things, and He begins to let the world know, I still run this thing. I have made it. And nothing will go on, only what I've allowed. Now then, I'll say this and close. I said to start with, if something didn't rise on the scene and stop this New World Order thing, yes. Politicians is doing their level best to make it workable. And God has allowed it to progress up till a certain time. But somewhere in front of us, there's chaos coming. All God has to do, brothers and sisters, is just start sending a few waves of confusion. And I have to believe there is chaos coming to America. Something that America never planned, something America never looked for, something that politicians didn't think of. It's in the making. It's brewing under the cover. And when it pops and breaks, brothers and sisters, there's going to be chaos here at the door of America. When it's over, there won't be enough left in America. I mean, political-wise. America will be knocked out of the world's role of leadership. Europe now will have to go alone. America's been used to rebuild, to rebuild, to rebuild. We never rebuilt Europe after World War I. But since World War II, we've been rebuilding. Rebuilding. We fought in Korea. A war be lost. And many thousands of boys Over 8,000 missing boys never reported, never found their remains. I have to say, brothers and sisters, that bunch of communist leaders lied. And they took us, our leadership, down the drain. The same thing happened in Vietnam. But there's a God up above. He's got the whole thing in the palm of his hand. From now on, he will run the show. Heavenly Father, I pray tonight. We know that you're the God of reality. You're the God that lives. You're the God that convicts man of his sin and his wrongful ways. You're the God of this word, and it is every bit true. We just pray tonight, Lord, that we might be found walking in harmony with you and your word. We might not be liked, we might not be adored, but Lord, we just pray that we can live and walk in your favor. Take what's been said, Lord, paint a picture in our hearts and lives, and help us, Lord, to be ready to walk and to live in reality with you. We ask this now in the blessed name of Jesus Christ. Amen. May the Lord bless you tonight. I want to say to Brother Mark, he's got a couple of visitors.